So I've got the book, Getting the Love That You Want. And if I just turn to the start, page 8, there's a paragraph here that says, when we fall in love, this unconscious, trapped in the eternal now and having only a dim awareness of the outside world, is trying to recreate the environment of childhood. And the reason the unconscious is trying to resurrect the past is not a matter of habit or blind compulsion, but of a compelling need to heal old childhood wounds. Just a bit further down, there's a section here. Additionally, we pick the partner to re-experience these old feelings so that we could then heal the sadness and pain from the past. So there's a theme there about trying to go back to childhood and resurrect the past, you know, so that you can heal it. Page 14. And it says, when you have a positive experience with your partner, your old brain encodes it by creating new connections between brain cells. When you have more and more positive interactions, the pathway intensifies. Meanwhile, the old and disruptive pathway that was created in your childhood loses strength. So this is really important because this is talking about a way out now. So if you do have a shadow, integrate your shadow. If your shadow is is the missing part of you, if you're like severely anxious and the missing part of you, your shadow is the avoidance side of you, you've got to practice your way out of that, right? And it's the same if you're an avoidant partner and your shadow is actually the missing part of you is actually being more caring and loving, or a bit more closer to what the anxious person does. Both partners have to practice coming to the middle, right? So this is when it says here, the more positive experiences you have with your partner, your brain encodes it by creating new brain connection, neural connections between brain cells. And this is just like positive reinforcement. It's like what I talk about in some of my other videos on creating habits. If you create a habit, a good habit, and then you reinforce it by doing it the next day and the next day and the next day, reinforcing that habit will actually completely change your identity. And it's the same in this context here. When we're talking about the imago match, you find someone who's the opposite of you, and your job is to use each other to heal each other and come to the middle. Because if you don't, you'll end up in that constant anxious avoidant trap, push-pull, that can just go on, So you've got to recognize your shadow, basically, and integrate it, and you can use each other. But sadly, not many people do that. Moving on. There's a great, in chapter 2, there's a little line at the bottom here that says, on page 20, that says, the 3 stages of human journey. It starts out well, it goes bad, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back to where we started. So again, that's about, in our adult lives, we try to get back to childhood, and, the unconscious reason for marriage and relationships is to finish childhood, try and fix it. Moving a bit further, I picked up another paragraph here, talks about, ironically, this is on page 24, the bottom, ironically, for reasons we explore in later chapters, fusers, those who experience neglectful caretaking as children, and isolators, who experience intrusive parenting, tend to grow up, marry each other, thus beginning an infuriating game of push-pull that leaves neither partner satisfied. And this is why it's so important to recognize this, otherwise you end up in that trap, that anxious avoidant trap. There's a great section here about tools of repression on page 29, and it says, whether children accept their parents' model or rebel against it, this early socialization plays a significant role in mate selection and, as we will soon see, is often a hidden source of tension in married life. And that's just that section's talking about, say, how our parents influence us. I think just before that on page 29. The way that parents influence our children more deeply however, is by example. Children instinctively observe the choices the parents make, the freedoms and pleasures they allow themselves, the talents they develop, the abilities they ignore, and the rules that they follow. All of this has a profound effect on children, right? So children, if you have children, they tend to, we were all children at one point. We tend to, and some of it can be, unconscious programming. We're influenced heavily by our parents, and if we are parents, we influence our children. And children watch everything, how you relate, how you talk to people, how you socialize, how you interact, so this is why, just going back to habit forming, it is so important for you to if you are on the anxious side, to recognize that and try and correct it by practicing the missing part of you, your shadow, which is to stop being so avoidant, maybe pull back a little bit, allow a bit of patience and space. Although it is really difficult, you've got to understand that you've got to reinforce that habit. Similar with people that are very avoidant, practicing being more loving. Although it may be really, probably even more difficult, it's important that you practice that, because you practice what feels uncomfortable to you. And this is what change is all about, as I talk about in many of my videos. It comes back to forming habits. And the first step is to recognize where you're going wrong. So you must know if you have issues, let's say you're avoidant, you must know that you're avoidant. Your job is to practice behaviors that is in your shadow, so you can integrate your shadow, right? And if you happen to be with someone, if you're avoidant, you happen to be with someone that's anxious, you can both work together to come to the middle, right? So that the next time, well, hopefully with that person, you've healed each other, best possible scenario, and you're still dating your shadow, right? So we say integrate your shadow, or you'll end up dating it. You'll still be dating your shadow. But this time, your shadow is not that far away. It's almost fully integrated. There's not that much of it. When you're out here, there's a massive gap between your reality and your shadow, the missing part of you. And you're just trying to close that gap. And you can do that together. This is a great concept in this book about using each other, because how many people do that? How many people behave a certain way, whether you're anxious or avoidant, and just keep repeating the cycle again and again? New relationship, it's better to really get to grips with, recognizing it. And I like the idea of, relating it back to habits. You are practicing those behaviors from the missing part of you, and then reinforcing it by continuing to do it, as it says on, I think it was page 20? Maybe a bit further on, yeah. Page 14, as it says here, you with every positive experience with your partner, your old brain encodes it by connecting new connections between brain cells, and the more you do it, you reinforce it. So your old brain, this book uses the brain, old brain, new brain. Old brain just basically means your subconscious, your subconscious part of your brain. Your new brain is your rational thought. And we can all think rationally, I shouldn't do this, or I shouldn't behave this way, but you still behave that way anyway, because your unconscious is doing it. That's your old brain. It takes a lot of training, but you've got to push through the discomfort and train your old brain by reinforcing good habits.